morning, everybody. Happy. Hope you all had a big weekend. It's Monday on TLDCast, the Training, Learning, and Development Cast. We are here every single day. Well, Monday through Friday anyways, 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, and 4 p.m. UK time. Do we have UK representation in the house this lovely Monday morning? I haven't even looked to see yet. I don't know if Marco stayed up all weekend or, it's pretty much hit or miss. He might drop in, but while I'm rambling, somebody can tell me if anybody drops in and let me know. But it's good to see everybody in the chat. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to tell all your friends about TLDcast, and you can do so by looking right above where you are chatting. There's a little button that says share. Click that share button and pick a social media platform of your choice, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or that wonderful non-existent Google+, and share with all of your friends, your network, your colleagues, and tell them we have a fantastic guest today, and we are chatting with Mike Rustici, or Rustici, however you want to say it. We'll get with him in just a second, but first, let me also tell you all about how to become a member. The most fantastic thing is you can just go to tldc.us, click on the Become a Member link, and then you can do all of the rest from there. The most wonderful thing is that you get to enjoy all of the fantastic, oh, hey, Tammy. We get to enjoy all of the fantastic members-only chats and casts that we've started cranking up. And speaking of chats, they are in Slack. So if you are not a Slack user, this is a fantastic time for you to learn a new tool and to engage in a chat environment, something like Slack. It's a bit of a trend of sorts, and we've been using it a lot within TLDC since we started and before, but we decided to make it a part of the community. So we'll get somebody to drop that link in there, and you do not have to be a paid member in order to join the chat, but you do have to be in order to join some of the closed channels that are members only chats, and for the members only cast, TLD cast members only information. But you also get a discount on our upcoming event. Super excited about it. It is right around the corner. It is TLDC8 Team. We had TLDC16 in San Diego in 2018. We're going to be in Phoenix, Arizona. But if we had it in Phoenix the same time that we had it in San Diego in 2016, everybody would melt. So we decided to move it to January and let everybody enjoy the most beautiful month of the year in Arizona. So if you are tired of the snow by the end of January and you need a break, no better place than Phoenix, Arizona. So get on down here and get registered. Hang out with us for 2 days, learn, gather all the value, build your career and network, build your network, build all of the things that you need to be successful in this world of training, learning, and development. And with that, I will say hello to our guest. Hello, Mike Rustici. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah. It has been, it's been a little while since you and I even had a chance to chat, but thanks for jumping in.
I think so. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So why don't I give you the floor, and I'll let you just tell everybody about who Mike is.
Sure. Well, I can tell you all about me personally. I have a whole theory on ice cream being the elixir of life and all these other wonderful bits about me, but I don't think you care so much about that. It's professionally that we're here to talk about. So I guess my journey into this space all started with a girl, as most great journeys tend to do when you're a young man. And it was a girl who kept me in Nashville after I graduated from college. And the most interesting job I could find as a software developer here in college was from a e-learning company back when e-learning was a brand new thing. Right around 1999, there was a company. It was called SafetyWeb.com that was building what was now we'd call a learning management system and OSHA training for safety as a result of a unfortunate fatality at the local Caterpillar franchise here in Nashville. They decided that family decided to take what was a tragedy and try to turn it into something good, which was to double down on their safety training and try to take advantage of this new thing called the internet to improve their ability to deliver the safety training they needed to keep all of their employees safe. And so to stick around, the girl that is now my wife, I decided to join that company as a software developer. And it turned out that a year or so later, one of the salespeople came running down the hall like a chicken with his head cut off, saying, "I've got this huge deal I can sell, but we need to implement this thing called SCORM that they're requiring of us." And so he said, "Anybody want to do that?" I said, "Oh, sure, I'll do that." And this big 1,000-page specification dropped on my desk, and somebody said, "Hey, go do this." And so I did that, and well, I guess that company turned into a company called Pure Safety, if anybody's heard of that company now. And a couple of years later, I got tired of working for Pure Safety and went out on my own as a freelance software developer and started a company called Rustici Software in my spare bedroom, because it was just me in a spare bedroom trying to make a buck. And somebody asked me at the time, "Hey," just completely by chance, somebody came to me and said, "Hey, do you know anybody can help me with this SCORM thing?" And I said, "Well, sure, I'll do that. I'll do anything for a buck." And did that and made a couple of bucks. And it turned out that, at the time, I just kind of wanted to say, well, maybe there's 5 or 6 other people in the world who need this obscure bit of knowledge that I seem to have acquired. And that was when Google AdWords was starting out. So I took out Google AdWords for SCORM, and it turns out that SCORM was the perfect Google AdWords. If you type those 5 letters into Google, that's really what you're looking for, is this one bit of obscure knowledge. And it turned out there was, not 5 or 6 other people, but 500 or 600 other people in the world as e-learning continued to bloom and the number of learning management systems exploded. Rustici Software developed into this niche player where we provided the SCORM implementation for, now it's up to a couple hundred LMSs, and tools like Articulate were one of our first customers as well. That company we started was all about culture and trying to create a great place to work, and we did that in spades. But we're just very fortunate to find this niche in providing a SCORM implementation to e-learning providers. And that was a great business for, Craig, that is the right website for where I currently am right now. That platform was a great platform to go build about a 50-person company where we just provided this one niche set of technology. But it also led into a great opportunity to go partner with ADL, the Department of Defense agency that created SCORM a long time ago, to create the next version of that. And so at Rustici Software in about 2012, we got to go partner with them to do Project Tin Can and create the Tin Can API, which is now called Experience API or XAPI, the standard of 1,000 names. And so we did that in 2012, 2013, and we knew that we had done something kind of big and interesting. Standards are super, super boring. When I try to tell people about SCORM and what we do, it's a great way to start an app. But standards are also really important for an industry. I like to say that standards, the way that software and industries work together, the standard defines and confines an industry. I like to talk about, the analogy to like a USB cable, where if you want to sell something on the mass market that plugs into a computer, it has to work with USB, right? Well, that cable has constraints, whether it's data transfer rate or power availability, whatever those constraints are, that defines and confines the products that could be on the market. Because you can't sell a product that exceeds those capabilities. So the standard limits what we can have in our space. Well, in our space, kind of e-learning, online training, corporate training, the only standard we have is SCORM, really. And SCORM was first created in the year 2000. So think about that. We have this entire space that's defined and confined by now 17-year-old technology, 17-year-old model. And so we knew that as that started to change and evolve, and as that standard, that interoperability platform got modernized, there would be a big opportunity for innovation and disruption in the space. And so we started a new research group as part of Rustici Software called Watershed to go figure out what's the big opportunity here? What's the big change going to look like? And we very quickly realized that the big opportunity involves data, involves all of the data that XAPI is going to make easily accessible. And we look at kind of the learning space and say that this space is really, really ripe for using data to drive analytics, to make data-driven decision making. And really, it's the only part of the organization that isn't doing that anymore. And so with Watershed, we've created an analytics platform specifically tailor-made for learning, for training, to go help this industry understand what we can do with data, understand the power of data to both optimize the offerings that we're putting out there, but also connect what we're doing to business results. And so as of about 2 years ago now, we formally split off Watershed and from Rustici Software, which we wound up selling off. And now my mission in life is to help people in this space understand the power of data, understand how to use analytics to really drive forward our industry. I can go on for a whole another hour probably about the opportunity, and I probably will here, about the opportunity that analytics offers to our space that really we haven't taken advantage of yet, and all the low-hanging fruit that's now suddenly possible as this data is all around us. I'll kind of stop there. That was a long introduction.
No, that was fantastic, and it touched on a whole bunch of different things that I want to talk to you about. But just curious, I'll start with the less important things. How did the name Watershed come about?
That's a great question. I think it was my business partner who came up with it. It's kind of a two-play, a watershed moment. We think this is a big change, a big differentiator in the world. But also, you think of a watershed. A watershed is the collection of all of the streams and lakes and rivers coming into one place. We can kind of use that metaphor for all of the data that is available to us, both in learning and training, but also business and performance data that we can all bring into one place and funnel it all down together.
Cool. All right. I knew there was a good reason for it. So, and I love the new logo, by the way. I think that's new, right? With the water drop there and everything.
Year and a half or so ago, somewhere right after the split.
Yeah. Okay. Well, not that new, but new to me anyways. Well, anyways, so awesome. Good stuff. So, yeah, we often talk about our industry or the lack of an industry. Anthony, I'll just jump in and fill that in for you. And the standards side of things. So let's just dive into that particular question, because I understand that XAPI now has become an official standard. Yes,
it's on the path to it. If you get into the nuances and the tech geeks, we're far from having an official standard, but they're certainly on the path to doing that. The IEEE would be the first step on that journey, and they have set up kind of an investigative committee to go write a paper to go figure it out, because these things just take forever. But they are becoming an official standard is important to some people, especially internationally. But in terms of vendors and adoption, oftentimes they're not waiting on that process to go forth and make it an official standard. Really, what matters is the adoption and incentives to adoption. There was a huge development a month or two ago where the Department of Defense updated one of their big procurement instructions, which
maybe that's what I was thinking of. There was that big announcement. So tell everybody a little bit about that. What does that mean?
So it's called a DoDI, a DoD instruction. It's 1322.26 if you really care all that much. But that was an instruction that was first created, a decade or more ago, that said, hey, if you're in the Department of Defense and you're procuring online training, make sure it conforms to SCORM so that we can reuse it, and it's not just this siloed one-off thing that we waste a bunch of money on. They've updated that to say SCORM, or now XAPI, as the new version of that standard. And why that's significant is the Department of Defense is one of, if not the largest consumers of online training. And so when they make something a requirement, it is a massive carrot for a lot of vendors who want to sell to them to implement something into their products. And the adoption of a standard is very much a chicken and egg type situation. It's just like a fax machine. One fax machine is useless. Two fax machines is a lot more useful. And the more you add, the value increases exponentially. It's the same with any standard. And so XAPI has been off to a good start. There's 100 or more, maybe 150 vendors who have all implemented this specification. But the more you can incent to adopt it, the value just increases exponentially every single time.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I knew it was really, really important. I know Aaron Silvers was really excited about it
Absolutely.
And helped get that pushed through and did a lot of work in that space, which was very exciting. And Deborah's, we've got a tech newbie in the house wondering about how to get started and learn XAPI, and we've got a lot of folks in the chat. Deborah, you are hitting us up right at the perfect time. Anthony is our resident XAPI expert. But also with Mike on as our guest today, we've got XAPI expertise galore today. So it's a good day to be on board if you want to be learning about XAPI. But it looks like Anthony got you covered, Deborah.
The one thing I'd add to Deborah's question there is, if you're a non-techie, you shouldn't need to know too much about XAPI. At the end of the day, if XAPI is working well, it's something that is just available to you, not something you need to go do. The thing you want to learn is what the impacts are and how it can affect you, so that you know how to ask your vendor for what you really want, other than just saying. The vendors just hate when they say, I want XAPI, but you don't know, you don't say why, or what you want.
It always shows up on the RFP from companies, right? They always say one of the items of the 150 laundry lists of should we buy your LMS lists is it XAPI compatible? And they have no idea even what they're asking it for, but they just somebody told them. Somebody that's important, so we better make sure that whatever we buy is XAPI compatible. So let's drill down a little bit deeper into that question, because I think it is important, because I would venture to say that an extremely large portion of the training and learning and development community is not really super tech savvy. I mean, maybe we've got some developers who do some authoring, some PowerPoint stuff, and then they hand it all off to a developer or whatnot. But what exactly should they know? Because especially at this point in time, it feels to me like you should know enough to at least be able to pitch the idea to your execs, to tell them why it's important, if it's an extra outlay of money, things like that, the idea and the concept of an LRS, things like that. Because there are a lot of LMSs out there that say that they are XAPI compliant, but they are not an LRS. And so you still need an LRS to get connected with that LMS. And then it becomes just a spaghetti of acronyms. Help us clear that up.
All right. So many different places we can go there. So let's first of all start with the notion of what is an LRS and what does it mean to be XAPI conformant? And then we'll dive into what are some of the specific things we could do with that. So Learning Record Store, or LRS, is a kind of a new class of system that we created when we wrote the original tin can specification. It was almost something we created by accident. We needed to describe the two systems that were communicating. And you didn't want to call it content anymore, so we called it a learning experience provider, because in XAPI, we're not just talking about e-learning talking to an LMS. We're talking about coaching and mentoring sessions. We're talking about informal learning, videos, games, simulations, classroom training, all of the different ways that we're trying to learn and capturing all of those things, not just e-learning content. And then we needed a way to describe the thing that was collecting all of that data. We didn't want to call it an LMS anymore, because LMSs are rebranding themselves into talent and other systems as well. So we just kind of made up a new word, a learning record store. And in our mind, that was the part of the LMS that tracks who's done what. And that's still what you can think of a learning record store as, is the thing that's tracking records of learning experiences. And very quickly, as we started presenting on tin can all around the world, the hand would always go up in the back of the room and say, well, where can I get a learning record store? Do you have a learning record store? And so Watershed originally was this kind of research lab to figure out what is a learning record store. And people really gravitated towards this idea of having a standalone learning record store, a system that sat out there, collected data from all of the different, the hundreds of places that learning was happening. So first thing to understand, a learning record store can be something that is independent. It can be a standalone system that sits outside of the LMS and outside of all the other systems. Or it can be a part of the LMS that collects all of this data and puts that into your LMS transcript. The role of the LMS in this kind of ecosystem, this LRS-centric ecosystem, is still kind of being figured out. A lot of times an LMS will be XAPI conformant, and they will generate statements. They will talk about the learning experiences that happen in the LMS, and push that into a learning record store. Other times, an LMS will have that LRS in it and consume data from a lot of these other systems. And in both of these cases, you really need to understand what is the learning record store doing and what can it do with that data. A standalone learning record store, this is what Watershed does. We focus on putting a lot of analytics and tools around that to help you understand the data. And that's really what you need to be looking at when you're looking at a learning record store. What can I do with the data that I'm collecting? Because just collecting it is kind of useless unless you can do something with it. And sometimes doing something with it means putting it into another system. Other times it puts reporting and analytics around that data. So now that's kind of a little bit about the ecosystem and what a learning record store is. Now, in terms of what else can XAPI do and what we should be asking for, actually, I think one of the big problems with XAPI and our ability to market it and talk about it is, honestly, it alleviate so many constraints of this 17-year-old model that it's hard to just narrow in and talk about just one or two of them. The easiest way to talk about what XAPI can do is just in that removal of constraints. If you look at what SCORM can do, SCORM allows you to track a single learner going through an e-learning course in a web browser launched from an LMS while connected to the internet. What percentage of what you've learned in your lifetime has come from an e-learning course from an LMS? It's a tiny, tiny fraction. XAPI is what allows us to interoperably track so much more, whether it's something happening on a mobile device or a game or a simulation, et cetera, et cetera. So when we're looking at XAPI, we're often not saying what we want to do is go implement XAPI. What we're often saying is, I want to do something that SCORM doesn't support. Here's a good opportunity to use XAPI. So, it might be, I want to deliver something on a mobile device and track it. Or it might be, I'm doing a lot of performance observation and want to track that into my learning record store. It might be, I want to track, data about behaviors and performance of my learners and go see if there's a correlation with learning events. I trained them to do something. Did they in fact do it? And did that improve their performance? And I can just go on and on and on with all of these different ways in which we can learn that we want to track. So that's often where people are getting started with XAPI. It's not about the actual technology. It's about, I want to do something in learning that my existing systems don't well support.
Yeah, what is it that we can do, and where can we get more data on the things that people are using, or the platforms that people are using to learn how to do their job and get information that is not part of your current ecosystem that the training department can track? I think that's the biggest win, and the biggest starting point that people need to understand is that it's not in many cases, when you're engaging with XAPI, you're not replacing your LMS. You are enhancing it or enabling it to do other things or gather data from another platform. But then what I've also found is that this tends to be the sticking point in selling and trying to convince executives. If you're a training manager or whatever, and you talk about XAPI and they say, great, didn't we just buy an LMS, 2 years ago or whatever? And you say, oh, no, we don't need to buy a new LMS. This isn't a new LMS. And they're like, so what is it? And you're like, well, it's an LRS. And then they're like, what, another platform? So we need an LMS and an LRS? And then all they see is dollar signs. And, oh, my God, why do we need two platforms for our training department? And then those conversations get very, very ugly, or they just end very quickly with, no, come back next time.
You should have a beer with our salespeople. They know that conversation well. No, it's true. And, the explosion of systems isn't a good thing for anybody. Where we find people have a lot of success is management loves numbers. They love data. They love analytics, but they don't think it's possible from learning. We've conditioned the C-suite to think that L&D is just this cost center that they have to pump some money into because they know they need it, but we're not able, I'm speaking very broad terms here, we're not able to kind of show them back, hey, this is what you got for your money. And I think that is utterly crazy. How the heck, right? We live in this knowledge-based economy, right, where talent is our most precious asset. how the heck do we let the group that's responsible for improving the value of that asset get by without any kind of accountability for results? None. So we have no accountability for saying we improved the value of this asset. We took up a bunch of their time, but we have no idea if we did anything useful. How is that possible? That's not sustainable. I actually think that in the 21st century, there's a guy named John Hagel I have a lot of respect for. He works for an elite part of Deloitte. And he talks about how scalable learning is probably the new reason for large organizations to exist in the 21st century. If we live in a world of near constant disruption, it used to be large organizations existed to do the same thing over and over again, be scalable, have scalable efficiency. Doing the same thing over and over again is a recipe for disaster in a world of near constant disruption. We need near constant innovation. In other words, we need to be able to continually learn and develop. He argues that in this upcoming world of exponential change, the ability to learn will be the single biggest strategic enabler for an organization. And I truly believe, yes, talent's the most precious asset, and I do believe learning will be the biggest enabler of strategic advantage in the 21st century. Well, how do you get there if you can't measure what you're doing? If you don't have any kind of way to use data both to drive continuous improvement and also use data to demonstrate the effectiveness of what you're doing? So, data and analytics are a huge thing for management. And it becomes really easy to get buy-in for a learning record store, and thus XAPI, if you focus on the data and the value you're able to demonstrate back to the business. And excuse me, there's a lot. Oftentimes, that is a tier of getting started. I see that the chat over there looking at free ways to go do that. Yes, Scrum Cloud, Learning Locker are free offerings. Watershed now has a free essentials tier. There's plenty of different ways to start showing the ability to capture this data in ways that get management excited. And we've got some great case studies we can share as well. Good.
So let me interject here real quick, and one of the bits that has always kind of sort of stopped it dead in its tracks for me is this idea of, I love the idea of being able to pull in so much data from so many different areas where we get learning, or where we normally do find most of our learning content, because we all agree, and we've had this conversation here on TLDCast quite a bit about, we learn from YouTube. We learn, we find content on a disparate server somewhere. Some engineer said, hey, go check out my the presentation I just gave at the engineering conference. You'll learn a whole lot with, just by going through that. Okay. It's all this stuff that's not in your LMS. But so now we've got this, this code, this bit of code, or this standard, or at least this technical way of now being able to track that sort of non-LMS related learning content. But the trick is getting that code into all those systems. So let's say that we want to track how much people are learning from their email. Can you put XAPI into your Gmail or into your Outlook? Or can you, if you're learning from a server somewhere, a different, like maybe you've got an enterprise social media system like Jive or something like that, right? Can you draw, is XAPI natively in that, and can an LRS just sort of suck all that data out of there? I mean, that seems to be where the trick lies. It's not in convincing the learning and development vendors to do it. They're certainly happy to say, yeah, we're compliant, because they want to be compliant with just about anything that's going to sell their product. It's going out there and getting these other platforms and the other areas where learning occurs, but those tools don't necessarily see themselves as a learning platform. And so is there work being done there, or is that work that we do, or how's that going to go?
I can't predict the future there, but so take a tool like SharePoint. It's really easy to, all these tools often have plugins that make it really easy, and a lot of times when a department will go do that, they'll release an open source plugin for some of those, which will make that possible. But convincing the non-learning vendors to adopt XAPI is an interesting thing, and I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but we have had some early success in there. For instance, Kaltura, the video platform, it has XAPI support now, based on a few big customers asking for it. We're actually working on some joint messaging to show that out there. Tools like Survey Gizmo also have it in there. So it's starting, and I don't know how far it will go. But a lot of these tools see learning as a big market for them, and see that XAPI is not a hard thing for them to do. So I'm actually really optimistic about that starting to happen. Where if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I'd be like, maybe if we get there, that would be great, but it would have been a stretch goal.
Yeah, it is. It's complicated. Hey, I Craig's reminding me I missed my 30-minute my 30-minute little windbreaker here. And I think everybody's heads are probably about to explode on all the technical talk and everything. So let's take a quick break here for just a couple minutes, and I'll say thank you to everybody. Mike, you can go ahead and grab a cup of coffee or take a jump into the chat if you want to and respond to those folks while
I was just scrolling through the chat. There's so many in there to go respond to. Can I get these afterwards, and I can respond to them offline via email or something afterwards?
Oh yeah, we'll figure out. We'll transfer them all into the chat in Slack or something like that. Yeah, we'll make it all happen. Yeah, so don't. And I'll just start by saying that after saying thank you everybody for jumping in and asking such fantastic questions, because I know this is an important trend. It's an important topic for all of you. So I know Craig helps us out a lot, grabbing notes and grabbing links and things like that for after the show, and we appreciate his help and everybody that jumps into the chat and helps us out, because there are always a lot of questions that people are asking, and we can't get to all of them all of the time, which is why we set up TLD chat, or moved the term TLD chat over to Slack. And so we can transfer a lot of these conversations over to the Slack group, and those will be ongoing conversations where we can gather all of the answers and get everybody connected in that space, and everybody can learn more about where they can go to get XAPI stuff. This might be such an important topic that we might even start a completely new channel just for XAPI content within that Slack group, because I think it is definitely that important. So do not fear. We don't need to get to all of these in this hour, but this is just a great place to get this conversation kick-started with somebody like Mike, and as always to have Anthony in the chat helping answer everybody's questions as well. It's great to have you both here and connecting as part of the community. And again, just wanted to say thanks to all of you. Thank you to everybody that has become a member and supported us since we started doing this. We really, really appreciate it. We have a lot of great content coming up in the works. We've been brainstorming a lot of stuff and been pushing forward in those directions. Progress in these areas tends to be a little bit slower than we would like, but we are cranking it up as fast as we can. And we are loving all of the help and the volunteer work that everybody is doing. So if you have an idea or a topic or something of interest that you want to jump in and help us out with, just let us know. If you want to do a TLD cast on something, a special cast, maybe you want to do a members only cast for yourself, reach out to Luis or myself, and we can figure out a way to make that happen for sure. We're definitely here for you guys. This is a community driven and developed and sponsored space, these TLD casts and TLD chat. And if it wasn't for you guys, there would be no reason for us to be hanging out here doing this. So thanks so much for being a part of this and supporting it. We really do appreciate you guys for helping us out and for enjoying it. And if you're getting some value out of what we're doing every single day, let us know. It's always nice to get good news. I know Mike Simmons, who's in the chat, he got himself an intern out of the whole deal, and others I know have gotten connected and built their network. And we're definitely looking forward to being a conduit between companies looking for qualified instructional designers, anybody that's hiring, to be able to find great talent here. And then for those working in the industry, anybody wanting to get into training, learning, and development and looking for work, we can help get you connected with those companies that are looking for professionals like yourself. So we're building that up and starting to ramp up that as well. So it will be great value. 2018 is going to be a great year for TLDC. So thanks again, everybody, for hanging out and being a part of what we're trying to do and trying to grow here. And we can't grow if you guys aren't telling your friends all about the things that we are doing here at TLDC. So I would encourage you again to click that share button and let all your friends know on whatever platform you like to use the most: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or the G+. It's all good stuff. We've got a ton of questions. So for the second half of the show, down to 20 minutes, we might have to do a lightning round in the Ask a Question section. Mike, thanks for jumping in and answering everybody in the chat. Feel free to keep doing that while I pull up some of these questions. Let me just read through one of these real quick. Maybe we've answered some of these, but we'll try to jump through all these in 20 minutes. Anything we don't get to, well, and even the questions that we do get to, but maybe we don't dive too deeply. Like I said, we will transfer those conversations over to TLD chat in Slack. So I know the links have been dropped into the chat. If you did not see those, just let us know and we can get those links to you as well. So we've got a question. I'm not sure SCORM is a problem or that XAPI is the solution. I think the challenge is with determining what data will be important or meaningful. I can store anything to a database. The question is, what data should be collected? Wow, that's a huge, broad question. How do you normally answer that when you get that question, Mike?
So yeah, it's not that SCORM is the problem or XAPI is the solution. Neither of them inherently does anything you couldn't do manually or just with a database. The big win that they provide is the removal of friction to make it easier and interoperable to just collect data at a click of a button versus having to go out and hire a developer and do something manual there. I've got a whole tangent I can go on as to how reducing friction really enables something to happen exponentially more than it would otherwise. But I think the spirit of the question is, how do we understand what data to collect? And there's two ways that people typically go about that. The first is to be very intentional about it, to say, to kind of draw from the scientific method. We have a question we want to ask and to form then a hypothesis about that question, and then to go say, what would I need to collect to, refute or confirm that hypothesis, and then go be very intentional about collecting that data with that one very specific goal in mind. There's another approach, which is honestly just to go collect as much as we can, especially let's focus on collecting what is easy, and then let's go, data mining is a term that's a little bit too intimidating. I like to call it just data digging is what people in learning are really more often doing. Just going around, start visualizing that and going and looking for trends, looking to set baseline levels. Let's go look for outliers to go find specific problems and everything. And both of those approaches are very valid, and both generate different benefits in either way, neither one of which is inherently right or wrong.
Yeah, I think the idea of XAPI and the value that we're talking about fits nicely into this idea, the major trend of learning and development needing to adapt to lean more towards the business and business metrics and be able to engage and connect with the business, as opposed to, like you mentioned earlier, being just this major expense line item in the business and being in our little silo and just creating courses all year long and forcing people to take them and all of that. This idea of getting out of that ivory tower and getting engaged with the business and saying, what are your metrics? What are you trying to do, Mr. Business side of the house? And how can we help? And then how can we measure whether or not we were successful or not in helping you and getting those ideas connected? So I think that to me is the real promise and the hope of the future of what XAPI can do for us is give us that ability to finally be able to, with data, speak the language of business and show the value that we offer, to the businesses that we support. So
okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, building on that, I think a lot of people start to hear that and they get intimidated a bit about the level of rigor necessary to prove learning's outcome on a business. And I kind of want to take a step back and unpack that a little bit and put that into context, because while lots of rigor, the more rigor we have, the better, 100%. But I want to put that into context. I'm going to look at my view as I'm a CEO of Watershed, and my job is to make decisions. And most of the time, almost all the time, when I'm making a decision in business, I do not have perfect data. I do not have causation proven and showing that if I do this, it is going to do this. And if I did, I wouldn't really have a business opportunity because everybody would be doing it. It'd be just too easy. Business is about making the best decision you can with whatever information you have, which is inherently imperfect. Having a little bit of information and just being able to understand how to use that information in context and knowing how reliable it is versus where it might not be reliable, that is a huge step forward. Just having the most basic sets of data and being able to start down that journey is a huge asset to a decision maker, as long as it's presented with the appropriate context and levels of certainty and reliability around it.
Yeah, and I think I like to tell people that the data needs, our job is to interpret that data and tell a story. Yeah. Everybody loves to hear the story. Like just showing people all of the really cool data, it kind of makes their eyes gloss over. But if you can tell a great story and that data is there to support the story that you're telling, that to me is where real influence and real change starts to happen. And honestly, where lots of great learning can happen too, when you can, influence that strongly. But let's run down a few more of these questions. I know we could talk about each one of these for hours on end. I'm certain of it, but wow, we've got a lot here. So, let's see. Oh, we already answered the last one. So I'm just going to go from the top down. What do you think the next 2 years looks like for L&D's role in the organization, and what will fuel or quell this?
Obviously I'm biased here. I'm going to go back to data and its role within there because that's really all I think about. But yeah, I think just based on what I've seen with the people who have started using data, it has instantly changed their perception within the organization. There's one of my favorite quotes from one of our clients, VPs, was, this is the type of thing we walk through cut glass to get to in our operations division. Being able to show that learning has an impact on operational metrics completely increases their stature and changes them to be a strategic part of the organization. I don't know if that can happen broadly in 2 years, but that is the journey I 100% see us starting on now. And it's very similar to what happened in marketing over the last 20 years, where 20 years ago, marketing was this creative thing, Don Draper, Mad Men type thing. We know half of it's working. We don't know which half of it's working. First thing got cut in a downturn, but it's not that anymore. It's completely data-driven, totally strategic, and totally linked into business outcomes. I see learning going on that exact same journey where we start to use data to quantify what we're doing, tie it to outcomes, and go from being a creative discipline that's tolerated to a strategic one that's embraced.
Yeah, awesome answer to that. And this next question is fantastic. So we can maybe even spend the last 15 minutes talking about this one because I think it's that good, but it might be easy. I don't know. There aren't many stories of big organizations using XAPI. Why has it taken so long for XAPI to catch on? Is it just for nerds?
At the end of the day, XAPI itself should be for nerds. Its benefits are what the rest of us should be looking at as they come out in the industry. But two separate questions. There's stories of adoption at big companies and levels of adoption. Let me start with the stories one first. And I actually put a post on LinkedIn about this because 6 months or so ago, I was able to post a case study from Visa about the successful enterprise-wide adoption of XAPI. Got 100,000 views on LinkedIn the first week. People loved it. It blew up. It was amazing. So I did a follow-up.
Because everybody's been waiting for it, right? That's what the question is all about too, right? We've all been waiting for that one enterprise to say, yeah, we've done it, and it's awesome.
Yeah. So I did a follow-up post on that about how it took literally 4 years from our first interaction with our champion there to get to the point where we could share that story. We talk about how a big organization needs to pilot something and then procure it. And then, each of those, it takes a year to pilot, 6 months to procure, a year to implement, and then 6 months of gathering enough data to show that there's something valuable there. And I don't know if those things I made up off the cuff after 4 years, but that's what it took in this case. So there are plenty of these stories there's another 6 months to wait for the marketing team to approve the case study, which is where we've got 3 or 4 other ones just sitting there.
Legal probably had to approve it as well.
It's mind-numbing how long these things take. So I can personally assure you there's a lot of...
And the irony of it all, the legal department first had to take the compliance course in the LMS in order to decide whether or not they were allowed to release it.
Yes. So there's a lot of them coming. Visa has a great one out there. I love the one from MedStar where they're connecting learning to actually reducing the time of cardiac arrest is one of my favorite one. We've got some great stories from Applied Industrial coming out about how they've been able to improve actual operational efficiencies, and you can quantify that into the 7 figures of savings over there. So they're coming. Those take time to get out, unfortunately. In terms of the adoption of XAPI, I can't decide if I think it's been fast or slow, to tell you the honest to God truth. I think the industry dynamics impact our perception of that, which is to say, we've been in this industry that's been stagnant for a long time. If you go back to my assertion earlier that SCORM has confined our industry for the last 17 years, we've got a place where all of the big players in our space have thrived on a 17-year-old model. And so when a new model that's disruptive comes along, they're not going to, they don't change and adopt that really quick. It's classic Clayton Christensen innovator's dilemma. They're going to continue to build on the model that's worked for them. And so innovation is happening at all these, 100 smaller companies that are out there doing really cool and interesting things. I know you're familiar with this dynamic. And it takes a while for those companies to have the market share to make adoption seem like it's everywhere. So it's this really weird dynamic of there's tons of adoption, but it's not amongst the big prevalent companies. But that also sets up this huge potential game-changing. All of a sudden, these companies, their offerings become good enough, and this whole ecosystem becomes good enough. It just changes things overnight in terms of what the industry looks like.
Right. It is. I know there are a lot of people out there interested in it. A lot of different companies are doing it. And again, it's not just implementing it, right? It's not just them buying it and getting on board and saying, yeah, we love it. And yeah, it's successful. It's then writing up the report and getting it spread out broadly and people seeing it. So I think there's probably a big gap between the number of people that are having successes with XAPI and the number that are actually being published and reported, in the industry. And that's always the way kind of it always seems to work, right? That's why I'm always leery whenever I finally see a news report on a new technology or something like that. It's like, wow, this must have been happening like 5 years ago, because now it finally got published. Exactly. And it probably took 5 years since it was done to get published.
I sometimes look back and think about what I got right and wrong in my career. And in 2013, I thought this was the best thing since sliced bread. Everybody would see its value. By 2014, everybody in the world would be doing it. And God, was I wrong. I've never been so wrong at how long something takes.
Yeah, it is. I can see where you probably have struggled with the I can't tell if it's moving fast or moving slow feeling. It's one of those things where it'll probably be like, you'll be sitting there scratching your head when all of a sudden one day, probably like 2 years from now, it's all of a sudden going to go mainstream somehow. And everyone's going to be like, it just happened overnight. All of a sudden, all of our systems have now changed and they're all XAPI based. And you're going to be like going, what? Yeah. We've been doing this for 10 years now. What are you talking about?
Oftentimes that woman who kept me in Nashville will lament my stubbornness and my hard-headedness, but it is a positive trait in trying to go through this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. Let me try one more last question, because it's got 3 votes on it and we've got, just about, 7 or 8 minutes left. So what are some of the coolest uses you've witnessed of XAPI learning analytics? There are plenty of unrealistic proofs of concept thrown around. What is real and what is not?
Yeah. So great question. So let's go back to the ones I can talk about there. The things that the coolest real things are when, in my mind, when we're connecting data to business outcomes, where we're able to go in and say, hey, we trained on these people and they did this thing. I mentioned one a minute ago from a hospital chain called MedStar. We've been talking about this one for a year or so now, where they were actually doing, they had a bad benchmark time of what's called code blue, which is a response time to cardiac arrest. And in that situation, the most important thing is whether or not, it's how quickly you can get paddles on their chest and get drugs in their system. And their response time on that was below benchmark. And so they put in a training program that included your typical, learning type stuff, learning classroom, et cetera. They're tracking all of that data. Their then next phase is they give the people on the hospital floor a mobile app to go do a kind of practice simulation that they can play with on their phone to further reinforce this. And they're feeding all that data into, this happens to be Watershed, into a learning record store. And then what they're doing is they're doing simulated code blues, where they'll call a mock code on the floor. They'll have a performance observer in there using XAPI apps to go record the data of who's doing what as they come in and do this. And they're able to bring all that data together, and they're able to go find the things that are taking the most time in the mock code blue simulation and go improve the training to go address those better. And they're using this to kind of have this cycle of continuous improvement between working backward from the mock simulation, the simulation, back to the mobile app, back to the learning, where they're able to go in and just continually optimize all of this stuff. And one of the things they found was one of the biggest causes of time delays was the fact that there wasn't a leader being established when they entered the room. And it was like, everybody's ready. No, you, no, me, you. And that 5 seconds,
who's running the show?
It was killing them. That's a bad metaphor. I'm sorry, I should not have said that one. Wrong. That was hurting their response time, would be the better way to say that. And so they're able to kind of go reinforce that and train to that better. I've talked about applied industrial. Andy's spoken about this a number of times at conferences, although we haven't been able to release the final case study just yet, where they're connecting, they're training their distribution center managers on financial aptitude so that they're able to take advantage of the data coming out of their new $80 million SAP system. And these distribution center managers are warehouse employees. They're giving them kind of this basic business finance course, and they're going in and connecting their performance on the training that they're delivering and their assessment of their knowledge of basic business finance concepts to improvements in store distribution center metrics that are coming out of their SAP system over there to go look at, or increasing the rate. I can't remember the specifics.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with, they call it WSAP, I think, or it's the warehouse management module of SAP. We implemented that at Intel when I was there 20 years ago. So I have very, very, very close knowledge with that particular product and implementing it. But I do get it and see it, in spinning it through my head real quick with our few minutes left, how long it takes for somebody to go pick product, have the little gun. Well, I don't know how they do it these days, but they had the little scanner gun, tell them what to go pick. They go pick it, they scan it, get it on the conveyor belt. Somebody else is at the belt running it through, scanning it as it goes by. They take all the little boxes, pack them into bigger boxes, put those boxes in the area for staging and then onto the truck. I mean, it's a pretty elaborate process to get that stuff out the door. And if you could shave, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes off from the time the order hits that person's little device to when it goes and gets on a truck and heads out the door, that's a lot of money at the end of the day, So I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, they were connecting it to other metrics, around return rates and accuracy and lots of different things you can improve on there.
Oh yeah, there's plenty. Yeah, there's logistics is actually more complex than most people would think. I thought it was going to be hugely boring when I got involved with it, but there turned out to be so many different complexities that it actually turned out to be kind of fun to learn that stuff. It made me feel a lot more empathy anytime I had to return a product. I always spin through my head, oh man, that guy in receiving is just going to be pissed when he gets this one.
They're often low margin businesses too, so a point of improvement makes a big difference to the profit at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, we're approaching the top of the hour, and I know everybody's got meetings. Even though it's the holiday season, everybody's still busy. So I'm going to wrap everything up here. But Mike, thanks so much for talking.
Thanks for having us. And yeah, I'd love to go address some of these other questions offline or in Slack or whatever. So just let me know the best way to do that. A lot of good stuff in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll shoot you an email, or I think somebody put the direct Slack link into the chat. I'm not exactly sure, but Luis and I'll get you all hooked up yeah, for sure. Because I mean, there's so much more people need to learn about XAPI and about Watershed, and just what are the next steps for people doing this. And we can't do it all in an hour, but let's definitely have you back. Let's reschedule you to come back in and give us a follow-up. Maybe there's some new stuff happening in the new year or whatnot, and we can get you. Yeah, that would be fantastic. All right, I'm going to close out your video, but you're still going to be here. We're still going to be live for a couple more minutes while I close things up, so you can jump into the chat and still chat with folks if you want to, or you can jump into your next meeting as well. Right. So thanks again, Mike. Appreciate it. All right, everybody. Hey, what a fantastic way to start your Monday with some mind-blowing high geekiness on XAPI. Thanks, Mike, for hanging out with us and talking about XAPI. It's huge. It's definitely one of the most important advancements in our industry, in our community, one of the things that everybody should be looking towards. And if you are, just learning about it for the first time, and you want to figure out how to make your career future proof, make, the business that you currently work in, your training department, if you're a training manager, or if your training manager doesn't know anything about XAPI right now, be the advocate for it and start educating your team on it. And one great way to do that is coming up in January. If you want to spin up quickly, join us at TLDC8 Team in Phoenix, Arizona, January 29th and 30th. Coming out with us for 2 days, and we will be certain to fill your head with all sorts of knowledge to get you to move forward in your career, help your particular organization find some solid footing during these uncertain times as the digital transformation continues to blast its way through organizations and disrupt, without any sense of empathy towards anybody and their jobs. So stay dialed in, stay connected. The community is here to support you. So if you need any sort of help at all, please feel free to reach out to your fellow community members, to myself, to Luis. We're happy to help you in any way that we can. Again, Slack is here for you. We're going to move this conversation over to Slack as well, and continue to educate and to engage with each other, and learn and grow and move forward in all the things that we do in training, learning, and development. That's why we're here. That's why we call ourselves TLDC. That's why we are a TLDcast here every single day, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, and 4 p.m. UK time. It's good to see everybody. You guys have a great day. Tomorrow we've got Michelle Fanfarillo, a very, very good friend of mine and one of the best leadership management gurus that I know of. She's got experiences in that space that are fantastic. They have lots and lots of models of leadership and development training. That's not just a one-off training thing, but doing year-long. I mean, all of the things that we talk about here, blended learning models that last, right? Focusing on learning as a long-term event is a critical thing to do, especially in leadership development training. So we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow with Michelle. And then, of course, Wednesday, it's going to be just one fun, fantastic blowout party. Let's just call it that, because it's our 200th episode. And so we all just need to relax and just celebrate hanging out here for, 200 days doing a live chat. People said I was crazy doing it. And yeah, they're probably right. But I've never been one to shy away from crazy. So I'm all good with it because I love hanging out with you guys. It's a great start to my day. And it gets me dialed in. So Wednesday is going to be tons of fun. And Thursday and Friday are wide open. I don't even know if we've decided yet if we're even going to do Thursday or Friday because of the holiday weekend and whatnot. So we probably are, just because, what would we do without it? But anyways, stay tuned. If you're not on the newsletter, get signed up for the newsletter so you can get all that information. Otherwise, you'll probably see a lot in the Slack. And, join us here every day. We'll update you as we go. So